You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Good afternoon. I'm Jay Holland in for Phil Williams. I call him Mr. Chairman. He's always right. So I'm glad to be on the right side as well with Phil. And certainly we have a lot of things to talk about. Just kind of doing a little early show prep here. CNN's got a flag up there on the TV screen. Biden marks 1 year since signing gun safety law. And then Fox News is running LA Dodgers honoring trans nuns group tonight. So I don't know if that tweaks any interests, but we are taking your phone calls at 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Here on Rightside Radio. Give us a call and let us know what you think about some of these unbelievable. I mean, I can't tell you how annoyed I am at some of these headlines around here sometimes. It just it defies imagination. I'm not that old, but I do remember when LA Dodgers honoring trans nuns group tonight was like taboo. I mean, it was unthinkable. Nobody would ever believe it, even if somebody said it. So I don't know. I'd like to get your take on it. It's just a sign of the times, I guess. I'm really at a loss to explain it other than the obvious decline of moral values, decay of what made this country great. We certainly didn't get here on the strength of trans nuns. So I'm a little beside myself sometimes. And I'm, like I said, I'm not that old. I'm 66 years old, so don't mind telling my age. But, I'm not going to regress and look back and say those were the good old days either, because, you just really have to think about it in terms of we are given the moment. We're not promised the next. And we have to live in this moment and undertake all of the sometimes craziness that comes with it. So it does seem that in this day and time, things are a lot, shall we say, less or not as good as, or, but then again, we don't need to necessarily look back so much. So how can we change what we have today? Seriously, how would you go about changing some of this stuff? It's really a very difficult question, especially when you have, for instance, if you want to break it down into, political groups. Your group is supposed to be doing the things that you want them to do. And ideally, that would be how, the government would conduct itself. But that's not necessarily the way things happen today. For instance, this vote in the House of Representatives just, a couple of days ago, where they let Adam Schiff off the hook. And the guy was obviously the biggest liar ever. He lied continuously for 3 or 4 years about how he had seen evidence and how this was happening and Trump was going down and all this, and then, of course, we can think of the Hillary Clinton dossier, bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign, total made-up lies. You know, there was a time when some of those kinds of things would condemn a campaign, but not today. So, you can't help but kind of look back and compare sometimes, but the real pressing issue here is how do we change all this? I'd like to get your take on it. It's not an easy question. In fact, it's probably one of the most complicated, very difficult questions that we have here in our time. 833-687-4448. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams tonight on assignment. I understand he's like down in Mobile or something, So anyway, lucky dude. So I'm stuck here looking at the golf course. Nice view from the second floor studio here. So anyway, I'm certainly honored and privileged to be able to be here and fill in for Phil. Back when I was doing talk shows every day, I had Phil on my program many times. At a period of time, Phil was the chairman of the Etowah County Republican Party. So when he called me to ask me to do this program today, I said, when I saw his name on my phone, and so I answered the phone and I said, hello, Mr. Chairman. I was torn between saying Mr. Chairman or Senator. So, but I reverted back to Mr. Chairman for some reason. Anyway, Phil is you guys are really lucky to have Phil because he is a very conscientious guy, very, as you know, a very opinionated guy, but he's always on the right side, which is why he calls this program Rightside Radio, and I kind of like that. But I was never that creative. I always call my program like Today with Jay, or I almost called my program something different one time. Let's see, what was that? I was going to call it. It was a takeoff on some television program that was popular at the time, but I don't know. I digress. But anyway, I think we have someone on the phone. Let's see. Sparky from Harvest, Dishonesty in Politics. Sparky, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, good. Enjoying the show, riding along in the vehicle with my wife, and enjoying your discussion and monologue. And Boomer, as always, excellent job.
Boomer and I go way back. He'll never tell you that, but Boomer and I go way back. So.
I've commented many times over the years, there's always dishonesty in politics, in the history of all life in politics. But it took an incredible turn about the time of the presidency of Mr. Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Where the news media all joined forces to say no matter what this guy says or does, he's got top cover. And it was considered ingracious to ever criticize or call the man out for egregious lies. We have to admit,
yes,
egregious lies, because it would be insulting the first African American president. And the Republicans were such cowards and geldings and weaklings. They never oppressed the guy either. So the smug, arrogant character that he was, he looked left and right, went, I can get away with telling outrageous lies, and nobody ever calls me on it. And the media became the industry that became the propaganda arm for the left wing anyway. And after a while, they got used to, and the American people, and now full generations of kids who are past college now, who are in junior high then, who don't expect honesty or integrity.
That's right.
In either government, politics, or the media. They're absolutely numb to the notion that there should be honesty, or they've lost whatever the value is in honesty and integrity. And it kind of scares the devil out of me. I'm almost your age. I'm in my 60s myself. it scares me for my granddaughter and her next generation, because I feel like we've lost something we potentially will never get back.
Well, it's very disconcerting for many of us, because we can remember a time when it was completely different. I remember during the Tet Offensive in the Vietnam War, 1968. And you may remember this as well, when we were caught off guard and initially had to kind of regroup. And then when we did regroup, we overwhelmed the enemy pretty quickly. Now, this was over a period of several weeks, but the North Vietnamese lost in the Tet Offensive something on the neighborhood of like 60,000 troops. That was what we lost for the entire war. They lost in a few weeks. But yet, Walter Cronkite, who was, quote, the most respected man in TV, unquote, at the time, got on there and said, because of our American embassy was, utterly destroyed and several other key things happened that he didn't like, he said and made the comment. Now, that's the key word here, because back then, Journalism 101 was pretty well practiced. That is who, what, when, where, and you leave the why to the editorial page, So most reporters back then were just giving the who, what, when, where, but not Cronkite. He had to comment about how this was really not going very well and that we should get out of this war. That started something in the media that has led to the evolution that we have seen today. Now, these so-called news programs that I'm watching here in this studio, Phil has one of the TVs set on Fox News, one on CNN. Pretty good contrast there, but still, these news, quote, news, unquote, programs are not real news. They're essentially what they are is a couple of cable channels with some very nice sets, highly paid talent that are forced to read a teleprompter, and these talented people that are delivering this so-called news don't write this news. They're just delivering it. So it's really a problem here with what we've got in terms of real actual communication. So from that point of view, we have slipped, as far as journalism goes. And to your point, Sparky, that's really a scary thing too.
Well, we have in a lot of ways as a society. Forget instant gratification, the internet. Culturally, kids glued to their quote unquote smartphones, ironically named smartphones 24/7. But I mean, people have got to be entertained. I've been to a few friends' churches in the last few years, and what I remember is the quiet, solemn, very ancient rituals of the Catholic Mass. And you go to these churches now, and it's entertainment. There's a PowerPoint with dreamy images,
yes,
and there's music. There's a live band, quality singing and playing. But I mean, are we going there to get our faith recharged? Or are we going there to be entertained? The same thing watching cable news. I don't watch television, but watching cable news it's entertainment. And when they're pandering to you as their base, you lap it up. You want to be entertained, and you want to be validated for your beliefs. So anybody who would watch, I don't know, The View or whatever, they're being entertained, certainly. And
they're being indoctrinated.
Being validated.
Yeah.
Their hatred of Donald Trump is being validated.
Yes.
But it's very entertaining to have somebody up on the screen, never mind the audience is pretty small, but who says the things that they want to hear.
Yeah.
Never mind, none of it's true. Hardly any of it's true. But my wife and I, we click around and find every different resource around the world for news just to compare what the editorial policies of this one versus that one, and somewhere in there you can divine the truth, but it's hard work.
Well, Sparky, it's all intertwined, and thank you for your call from Harvest, listening on WVNN, AM and FM in Huntsville, and we appreciate you and taking the time to call. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come right back here. I'm Jay Holland, filling in for Phil Williams on Right Side Radio. Spanning south of Birmingham to north of Huntsville, from Tuscaloosa to Gadsden, with parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. I don't think I did that quite as good as Phil, but I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. This is Right Side Radio. And I was just talking to Boomer during the break, and it suddenly occurred to me what the name of that program was. I couldn't think of it a while ago, but it was back in sometime in the 90s. There was a television program that was extremely popular. It was called Grey's Anatomy, and I was thinking that I would call my program Jay's Anatomy, a daily dissection of the news, but I never did that. But it was fun while it lasted, I guess. We had a lot of good programs, and I really enjoyed, and it's kind of like Sparky. I had a series of signature callers, is what I called them. And they would call in routinely or regularly, and, it was like Phyllis from Mulga for Feinbaum, and Phyllis passed away, I understand, which I was really sad to hear about. But Feinbaum and I worked together at WERC many years ago, back in the early 2000s. And Feinbaum has gone on to just do wonderful things. We're going to start talking a little sports in the next segment. I want to get from you guys what's going on with the SEC scheduling. I've not read anything. I saw a thing from Kevin Skarbinski where he said Alabama and Auburn have been screwed by the SEC realignment for scheduling. So I'd like to get somebody's take on that, and y'all can kind of fill me in for a change. That might be interesting. So we'll talk a little SEC football when we come back, and several other interesting avenues of discussion that are available to us, and we'll seize them all. So take no prisoners. This is Right Side Radio. I'm Jay Holland, sitting in for the venerable Phil Williams, former state senator, former chairman of the Etowah County Republican Party, but absent with leave today. So, and of course, a former member of the military. I think it was a colonel in the United States Army. So good for him. And we appreciate his service. We appreciate you listening to Right Side Radio. Stay with us through the break, and we'll be right back. Before you know it, I'm Jay Holland. This is Right Side Radio. Rightside Radio. Jay Holland here, sitting in for Phil Williams. And we're taking your calls at 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT here on Rightside Radio. And
Jay,
Boomer has a couple of things. What's
Yeah,
up?
we got a couple text messages I wanted to read out. Tony from Piedmont, he goes, Uppercase Jay, good to hear from you again.
Oh,
Yesterday,
gosh.
today, been a long time.
Yeah. That's that goes back a ways.
Yes, and then another text from Gray Falcon from Ardmore, Alabama. He says, I have a serious question. What does the LGBTQ, whatever, community, what do they want? They have equality under the law.
Well, Gray Falcon, this is not hard. This is simply put, this is rebellion against God and God's law. That's what this is. It's real easy. If you take a man that dresses up like these people dress up, I don't know if you've seen these transgender types that are trying to get, fleece the Dodgers. I mean, they had them on Fox just when we came in to start the show. These people are rebelling against God and His law. That's what this is. And they find value in shock. They find value in repulsiveness. They find value in making you wonder what the heck they think they're doing. This is somebody searching for help. And that's the way I see it. Now, I've known some homosexuals in my life that have all, to a person, been very unhappy. Inside, they find no happiness. They're looking for happiness. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for everything that they can't get elsewhere. Now, I'm no psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm no shrink. I'm just a guy that's lived life. And every homosexual that I've ever known has been searching for something they can't find somewhere else. They can't find it in church. They can't find it in the Kiwanis Club. They can't find it on the golf course. They can't find it anywhere. So they resort to shocking people. They resort to vulgarity. They resort to concepts that would create doubt about their validity in normal thinking persons. So, and there's no race, there's no gender, there's no boundaries here for these people. There's no boundaries, none. If they could get away with killing you, they would. And in fact, they're just doing it slow. They're killing our society. They're killing our values. They're killing everything in their power to kill. And this, simply put, is a spiritual battle. So it's no surprise to me. I mean, I'm not a real smart guy, but I do know that these people need acceptance. They need you to acknowledge them. This is why they continually force this stuff down your throat and think nothing of it. To them, they're just living life. What was it that guy said that took his shirt off in the White House or whatever it was? Said, I just living my joy. I thought, yeah, that pretty well sums it up. They don't care who they offend. They don't care about you. All they care about is fulfilling their joy. So this is what, and I've done a real poor job of kind of wandering around, Gray Falcon, but this is, to me, this is what the problem is. They need you to accept them for who they are, for who they think they are. What they are, and refuse to admit it, is that they are a child of God. And God will forgive them. Jesus Christ died so that they can have life and have it more abundantly. So the answer is right there under their nose. They just refuse to grab it. They just refuse to accept it. They refuse to acknowledge it. They think they know better than God. This is the key to why these people act like they do. If you don't have any boundaries, if you don't have any restrictions, if you have no governance whatsoever, this is the lowest common denominator. This is where the human race is going to end up. If somebody doesn't step up and say, no, we're not going there. And not just no, hell no, we're not going there. So, I don't know why we as a society continue to denigrate ourselves. But we do. And somehow it's all couched into tolerance. This is the word that everybody uses. Oh, you've got to tolerate the left. You've got to placate them. You've got to, you got to spoon feed them. You've got to take care of them. You know what? This is really getting to the point where I am just, I guess I would probably be lying if I said I was flabbergasted or, because I'm really not. I've seen it sort of in a little microcosm when I was even in college. I had a professor who was a homosexual. He was not very overt with it. He was kind of conservative and try to sort of, be one of these kind of guys, a little stealthy, slip in and, be a normal guy. And then all of a sudden, and he pulled it on me one night. I was his neighbor. I lived in the same apartment complex as he lived in. And he asked me to come over and help him move a couch. And me being the good old guy I am, I said, oh, sure, I'll do that. I'll be glad to help you. So I went over to his apartment and, inevitably he made the move. And I told him in no uncertain terms that I was not going to tolerate that. And he started crying. I mean, he literally was a basket case right there in front of me. And this was a highly respected college professor, taught English. And, I had to threaten him, but he started crying. And I don't know. I've had several experiences like that have led me to believe that they're searching, they're looking, they're hoping, they're really trying hard to find acceptance. And, I ended up witnessing to the guy, and I've done that to several people. But I don't hate them. And, that's the thing that they always accuse you. Oh, the hate has to stop, And so number one, they're automatically assuming that we hate just because we don't find their lifestyle tolerable to, the way we were taught to live. So automatically you're a hater, and there's no negotiation. There's no room. There's no difference. If you object, if you disapprove of someone's lifestyle, you're a hater. And to me, that is a very low form of intellectual rationale. You just can't just haul off and write somebody off just because you disagree with one thing. Now, granted, that's a pretty big thing, but it's still just a disagreement. It doesn't mean that you have all of this deep-seated anti-LGBTQ hate seething under your skin, about ready to blow up in their face or something. No, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that they find your acceptance or your indulgence in this particular activity not for them. So long story short, that's what the LGBTQ community is looking for. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for you to break your rules to accommodate them. And I refuse to do that. Now I'll be their friend. I'll work with them. I'll witness to them. I'll take them to church. I'll do whatever I can. I'll help. But I am not going to cross that line and get down in the mud with them. I'm not going to do it. So if they want to hate me for that, that's fine. Last time I checked, we still have some freedoms in this country. And as long as we still have those and Joe Biden don't shut them down, then which he's doing fairly quickly, because before too much longer, it's going to be illegal to talk like this on the public airways. So if you don't think I'm right, then you need to reevaluate. This thing is going downhill fast. When you've got a bunch of transgenders assaulting women, competing against women, taking the maternal part of our society and just clubbing them, all in the name of acceptance. And, it's just, number one, men should not be competing with women. So, that goes without saying, but you can't tell a transgender that. So, I have seen some vitriolic arguments and protests and stuff like that on the news about some of this stuff. So what's that Gaines woman? She's I can't remember her first name right now for some reason, but she's the one. She's the only one standing up, and I have really been very impressed with her determination to keep her sport pure. But, the NCAA and all the big sports organizations, they're right in there with the trans slamming women. So, and that's what this is. This is bullying women. This is what we were always taught not to do. You don't hit your sister. You don't push a woman. You don't, you open the door for women. So I don't know where we're going with this society, but it ain't good, folks. And if you hadn't noticed, it's getting worse. So we really do have some issues to resolve, and I don't know where to resolve it. I don't know where it starts, but I do know this. As long as we're able to communicate with each other like we're doing now, on the radio, on the internet, in platforms that allow the free exchange of ideas, I think we're going to be at least in the arena to have a chance. So it may be closing in, but we still have this chance. And as long as I'm alive, and as long as I can breathe, and as long as I can sit in front of a microphone somewhere, every now and then I'm going to continue to fight the fight. This is Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. This is Rightside Radio. Thanks for joining us. We'll take a quick break and we'll come right back. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland, sitting in for the venerable Phil Williams, who's on assignment today down in the port city of Mobile, spanning the south of Birmingham to north of Huntsville, from Tuscaloosa to Gadsden, with parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. This is Rightside Radio. Thanks for joining us here. We have... by the way, the phone line is open, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68 right. Brian from Huntsville on WVNN. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
I'm mighty fine. I hope you're doing well, sir.
Good, thank you.
But it's not in the Bible, but the term hate the sin but love the sinner has been used for many, many years to reflect why God sent part of himself, Jesus, to save us. He loves us.
No doubt.
He hates the sin. So, I love my Savior, my friends, my neighbors, but then again, I got to remember I've got some problems myself.
Well, that's the key. And, we're all human. We're all imperfect beings. And, we're just not going to get there except through God's grace. And this is the great lesson of the Bible. We can't do it ourselves. The more we try, the worse we fail. And this is the direct result of what we're seeing today. So which is one of the reasons Jesus went among the Samaritans and the tax collectors and other things. He wasn't trying to condone to them. He was trying to let them know that he forgives them, but they need to, how do you say it? Step it up a notch. Yeah. Well, it's not really difficult for people like me and you. We can recognize these kinds of things. It takes courage, though, for someone who's lost to listen and understand that there is something bigger. There is something better. That's the promise of God, and it's really a matter of perspective. A lot of it has to do with how you were raised, the conditions with which you were raised, and how, there's a lot of unseemly, very difficult things out there, no doubt about it. All right, Dale from Athens. What's up, buddy?
Man, glad to talk to you today, and thank you for bringing that up about the way we're raised. Voltaire said back in the 14th century, we're creatures of the time in which we live. And we look at all the immorality that's going on right now. We have turned the other cheek for too long, and we've accepted immorality. Immorality in the schools, immorality with methadone clinics, moving murders and crimes to becoming now a mental issue, closing prisons, looking at acceptance of everything. And it makes you wonder, why is it that we have to do this? Why can we not recognize crimes for what they are, immorality for what it is, and raise our children to recognize those? I was telling a group of friends the other day that it is our job as parents, as Christians, and as fathers, especially Father's Day this month, we must raise our children to respect this country, to respect morals, and to raise them with the capability in a good Christian manner where if they have to step up like the folks did during the invasion of Normandy, I pray God that we're raising them the right way.
Well, it's definitely a challenge. It's every biggest challenge as it is, to storm the beaches of Normandy in a less violent sort of way. But the challenge is the same. You've got to overcome a tremendous obstacle, and that obstacle in this society has become tolerance. We tolerate too much, and there has to be some standards. There has to be, a set of rules. And when you bend and break and destroy the rules, then anything goes, and you got, all these trans crazies putting whiteface on and calling themselves the trans Catholic nuns and all this stuff. It's just totally out of control. But it is an obstacle, and we as Christians have to overcome. I'm Jay Holland. We'll take the break. We'll come right back. This is Right Side Radio. Thank you, Jeff Davis. Jay Holland here with Rightside Radio, filling in for Phil Williams. Our number is 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Give us a call or text us at that number as well. We'd love to hear your take on all of these issues. We have Nathan calling from one of the most beautiful spots in all of Alabama, Locust Fork. Nathan, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good, man. What's up?
Good. Hey, I was just thinking on the points that you were making earlier about the LGBTQ or whatever they are, on how they want to be acknowledged or accepted.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I agree that's what they...
Whether you like it or not, that's what, whether you like it or not, that's the thing. Yeah.
Right. They want to be acknowledged, like to make a scene to where they can be. But as far as accepting to a point, I don't think they care if you personally accept the way that they are. But they pretty much want you to condone or agree to them. And if we're supposed to love everybody, how can we tell them that that's okay if that's going to cause them to burn in hell even?
Yeah, that's you just hit on the great conundrum, of our time. We're supposed to love everybody. We're supposed to be tolerant. We're supposed to do this. We're supposed to do that. But you know what? There is a time and a place for everything under the sun. And Nathan, you're exactly right. They use what you've always been taught. If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all, and all these kinds of, homonyms and antonyms and synonyms and everything else, and they use it against you. They're very, very smart. And it's a great point.
Right.
It's a great point.
And one more thing real quick is, as far as like you were saying earlier, they may cut our freedom of speech if the elections continue to the left. If we don't break in, it's going to be to the point that where, like the IRS is either going to shut you down. I mean, they're going to find something if you didn't do your taxes right or whatever. I mean, you could be arrested, and I'm not so sure that they got the measures in place on this next election to stop all the fraud, because they have the power to pretty much shut down all the polls. And the Justice Department, they're not going to do anything if they cheat. Now, if you cheat, on the other hand, on the right side, they're going to lock you up. I mean, that's to the point that we are.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt. There is definitely a double standard. There's also, unfortunately, the Department of Justice has a different set of standards for, say, Donald Trump as they do for Joe Biden. And it's unfortunate, but that's exactly right, Nathan. You have hit the nail on the head and pretty well defined what our problem is. The question now still remains: how do we handle this? And I think you did say something in your commentary that if we don't stand up, and I think that's exactly right. Somehow, some way, the regular folks of this country are going to have to stand up. They used to call us the great silent majority. Remember that?
Somewhat. I never used to follow politics to this point, but
yeah, well,
it's got to the point that it's completely ridiculous, and I think we're losing our freedom. I don't feel that we're a free country anymore at all.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people feel that way, Nathan, and you have some reason to feel that way, and it's unfortunate, but unless we can get a hold of this thing and recognize that we do have free will in this country, which is, this is what this whole thing was founded on, was freedom of religion and free will, a free country, the freedom to do with what we will to make ourselves as successful as we wish. And that's the foundation of this country. That's what our founders fought and died for. But we're quickly losing it, unfortunately. And
right, we're coming to a point in this world where it's completely biblical.
Yeah.
I've read the Bible back and forth, and particularly the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. And I see what it comes to is to me, I'm not a prophet, but it's looking like prophecy's coming true, and I pretty much see things before they happen.
Yeah.
And I try to say, hey, this is gonna go on, and it most of the time it does.
Well,
And it's just coming to a bad place. But I think there's still a lot of great people in the world, not just in America, but in the world. We're just going to have to stand up. And if it's the time, then there's nothing we can do about it. We're to fear not, because these things must come to pass.
amen.
But it's either one or the other.
Yeah, that's well said, Nathan, and couldn't agree more. We've got a decision to make, and as a society, it's going to be a tough decision, and we're going to have to make it, though, where there's no avoiding it. Thank you for the call, Nathan, and we really
Sir.
appreciate it. Locust Fork, Alabama. All right. Well, what's on your mind? We still haven't, I realize this subject that we're talking about is so serious. It's very, very important, and people need to realize how important it really is. And I think that, like Nathan, he realizes it, and he knows where this is going. And I'm thinking that more and more people are beginning to wake up and find out that they're going to be forced, like our founders, like our forefathers. They're going to be forced to fight the bloody British. We don't want to have to do it. They're the strongest military in the world, but we're going to have to take them on, or we're not going to be around any longer. They're going to tax us out of existence. It's that's in our DNA. So eventually, I think it will rise up, as it has in the past. But until then, all of us that do realize it, like Nathan, we're going to have to really bide our time and wait for the right moment. And who knows when that might be? It might be today, it might be tomorrow, but it's coming. And there will be a reckoning, and we will see how it goes. But we can't keep up this kind of pace. Now, Phil's been talking about some of the things like the attack on appliances and all of the stuff that's going on around the quote green unquote movement in this country. Which is all based on the assumption that God is not in control. God has no input. God has no say. God has zero, even in spite of the uncontradictory evidence that God unquestionably founded this country. I mean, you just look at the events that occurred to lead up to the founding of this nation, and there is no question that it was divine providence. No question. Yet you have all of these doubters and dissenters and, naysayers and everybody else that's, taking this thing into this abyss that we find ourselves falling into. But, I have no doubt, because God said there would be a remnant. And there is a remnant out there, and you just heard one of the members, Nathan, from Locust Fork, Alabama. And he's on the right track. Like we're on the right side, and we always will be here on Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland, sitting in for Phil Williams. I really kind of want to shift gears in the last half of this program. We're not quite there yet, but around 3:30 or so, we'll shift into the second half. But I'm not a huge sports guy. I've always liked it. I've always been around it. I've always, been interested in it. But something happened this past week with the SEC. The new schedules were released. Everybody was buzzing about it. And I'll be honest, because I don't know how to be anything else, but I'll be honest with you. I have not read any. I mean, I've read maybe just a blip from Kevin Skarbinski, and I respect Skarbinski. I think he's a pretty much a sports authority. But Skarbinski, and I just saw a headline where he said Alabama and Auburn were screwed by the SEC. So I don't know anything about it. I don't know why Skarbinski said that. But if you know why, I would love for you to educate me, because I'll be happy to plead ignorance to something that I don't know anything about, and that is the new SEC schedules for Alabama and Auburn particularly. But, of course, my opinion has always been that the reason Georgia has been national champions for the last 2 years is because their schedule is so easy. And the SEC East, in my opinion, it's about to be phased out. But the SEC East with Florida, Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee and Georgia is the East, is the least of the SEC. In other words, they're the weakest. Florida used to be a big power, but they're not anymore. And then, of course, Georgia also plays Georgia Tech, which is in the ACC, but they used to be a major power, in college football. They're not anymore. They hadn't been in 30 years or more, maybe 50 years. I mean, I remember Bobby Dodd in the 60s, and Georgia Tech was a good team. I remember when Bill Curry was the coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and we went to Grant Field in Atlanta and got whooped. And that was in the 80s sometime. Maybe early 90s. No, I guess it was in the 80s, late 80s. So anyway, Georgia Tech has been a good team, but they're not anymore. Florida has been a good team, but they're not anymore. USC has never really been a strong, what you would call dominant college football team. Now they've been good, but they don't have that dominate type record. You know what I'm saying? So you take all now Tennessee's been up and down, and I remember Conridge Holloway coming out of Huntsville, Alabama, and turning the world on its ear in the early 70s. I was in high school at the time, and I thought Conridge Holloway was unbelievable. And if you ever just go back and watch some YouTube films. You talking about unbelievable. Conridge Holloway, and he's still around. I don't know what he's doing, but Tennessee was one of those programs that's been up and down. Right now they're up. So Kentucky has never been a major power. Vanderbilt has never been a major power. So the SEC East has always been weak, and the Georgia Bulldogs have been the beneficiaries of some really weak schedules. I mean, they played Samford last year. When Alabama was going to Austin to play Texas, Georgia welcomed the Samford Bulldogs in between the hedges. I still can't. So anyway, long story short, I'd like to know from some of you that are smarter than the average bear on sports, what all this realignment. Of course, we have Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC, and it's an inevitable thing that they're going to be, redoing all the schedules. But what's your take on SEC scheduling? Love to hear from you. I'm not going to even get close to even saying that I'm as smart as like a Feinbaum on sports. But, I know Feinbaum, and I've known him for a long time, and he's a good guy, very smart guy, but Feinbaum is a bomb thrower. You know that. He loves to throw the grenade into a crowd and watch what happens after it blows up, All right, we'll take the break. We'll come right back. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. This is Right Side Radio. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams, the former chairman of the Ottawa County Republican Party, former Alabama state senator. This is Rightside Radio. Thank you for joining us. Our number is 833-687-4448, 833-68-RIGHT. You can also text us at that number, and we'd love to hear from you on any interesting situation that you have. You can also tune us in on the live stream at rightsideradio.org. That's rightsideradio.org. And I was packing up to come over here with my computer and everything, and I just wanted to share this with the audience that's watching. This is something that's kind of unusual. You won't. I can tell you this, that Phil Williams doesn't have one of these. But I'm kind of proud of this, and I just happened to have it stored in my backpack, and I had forgotten that it was in there. But when I got here and unpacked my computer, there it was. And I am talking about my third class radio telephone operator's permit. This is the Federal Communications Commission, and I'm going to turn it around here, Boomer, so they can see it. Can they see it okay?
Yes, sir.
So there you are, an official document, and the date on this is August 3rd, 1976. So I was 2 years out of high school, a sophomore at Jacksonville State, and thought I had the tiger by the tail. All right, we'll take Will in Athens. Will, you're on Rightside Radio. Thanks for calling.
Thank you for taking my call, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, as an American, I just struggle with this, and I just wanted to get your opinion. You say that we were a country that was founded upon freedom, but how does a country that a founding principle of freedom participate in such a dreadful institution of slavery like the history of this country?
You're asking me that?
Yes.
Well, it's, it's real easy to look back and do a little Monday morning quarterbacking on this kind of thing. As far as something like slavery. Slavery was not limited to just the United States. You do know that, right?
You're correct, sir. I do understand that. But one thing that we also have to understand, if you understand that slavery in the United States, it was a far more brutal form of slavery. It was slavery that was traced through the mother instead of the father. So what that allowed slavery to do, even rape women.
Hey, hold that thought. I'm going to have to cut you off for a second. We're going to have to take a break. This is a hard break. I have no choice. So stay with us. We'll be right back. You're listening to Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for the Venerable Phil Williams on assignment today in Mobile, Alabama. Good for him. All right. So I have Will from Athens on the line, and Will is wanting me to expound on the idea of slavery in a free country. And we didn't really get a chance to finish our conversation, so we're going to bring Will back on and finish up. And Will, let me just say, from what you have asked so far, my take on this is that, number one, I've done some reading. I've done I'm not going to say a lot of research, but I've done some research that probably very few people have actually delved into. For instance, I'll just tell you some of the books that I have read have been about the late war between the states. Now, a lot of people call that the Civil War, and I don't agree. I call it the war between the states because saying the Civil War precludes secession, and the southern states did secede from the United States. I mean, it's a fact. So to say Civil War,
I'll disagree with you.
Civil War,
I certainly choose the Civil War.
Civil War denotes that there was a war between, in the same country, and the secession that the southern states did do precluded that. That meant that we were a different country in the South, which is not a civil war. So I call it the war between the states to be correct. So, secession happened, Will, whether you want to agree with it or not. Secession did happen. So if you're not going to agree with that, then we're probably not going to agree with much else. But the truth is...
But see, that's okay. We don't have to agree, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'm not asking you to agree. I'm just asking you to recognize that, number one, the United States of America was not the only country to ever employ slavery as a means to an end. The problem here is that it's become a real political football, and now we've got people that never even was even around slavery and have that are making claims for reparations based on something that was 150, 60 years ago. So it's become a political football, in other words, Will, and it's just not really a serious issue, if you ask me, because the amount of freedom... Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Can I speak?
Sure.
So I too, like you, have read pretty extensively upon this subject as well. And if it would be so simple to hear and agree with you, everything that you just said, if it wasn't for the real history of this country. And the real history says that slavery just didn't end in freedom abound for everybody. That wasn't the case. There was 100 years of Jim Crow laws that limited the freedom of people that, specifically of black people in this country. Mm-hmm. There was 100 years of Jim Crow law that virtually went against the Constitution, the amendments in the Constitution from the 14th through the 17th Amendments. Jim Crow is as much part of the history of this country as anything else, sir. In that 100 years included brutality and violence, and it wasn't slavery, but it wasn't far from it.
Well, I agree with you, Will.
If you don't believe me, sir, this is Alabama, and we are governed by a 1901 Constitution. Mm-hmm. Go read the original 1901 Constitution, and then tell me that I'm wrong.
Well, I agree with you, Will, on several issues there, but I would remind you that the very institution that you complain of is the very institution that continues to, quote, enslave, unquote, its people. And that is
I don't understand.
Well, just bear with me. The Democrat Party instituted Jim Crow. It's as plain as day. The Democrat Party did it. They did it. They did it for a reason. And the reason was to keep black people enslaved. And the Democrats are still doing it to this very day. And you complain about it, but you don't recognize the oppressor here. The oppressor is the Democrat Party.
No, sir, you don't recognize the oppressor. But let me just, and please don't disconnect me, okay? Let me tell you who started the oppression of black people. It was conservative white men, sir. Conservative white men.
No, there were Democrats. They were all Democrats. I happen to know this for a fact. They were all Democrats.
Okay, they were conservative white men, but they voted Democrat back in the 1860s, sir. They voted Democrat then. I would be fair to say to you that the modern Republican is probably the progeny of the old Democrat, especially in the South. His feelings, his thoughts, especially when it comes to black people, are very much the same. The modern Republican didn't become the modern Republican until Goldwater came through fighting integration in schools, fighting integration in military, and promising a hands-off approach to Jim Crow laws in the late 50s, and then Shazam, most of the white people in the South slowly but surely became Republicans. But, sir, the parties do not formulate thought. It's the people that formulate the thought. And certainly you have to agree with me, sir. Surely to God you know that a President Grant or a President Lincoln who opposed slavery in every way would never be in the same political party with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Donald Trump. Surely we can agree on that.
Well, I happen to believe that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump and all of the other so-called radical right are right. That's why we call this Rightside Radio. This is not a political discussion here for changing anything other than what we believe is the wrong side. Your side is obviously something that has been deeply rooted in a lot of tragedy. It has been. But I would say this.
But let me tell you this. It is part of I am the progeny of slaves, but I'm the proud progeny of slaves.
But I don't think you deserve $50 million for that. I don't believe that at all.
I've never asked you for $50 million.
Well, you tell you tell the radicals out in California that, So listen.
But let me say this, sir. I understand. I'm not aware of what they're asking for in California. But sir, I believe this. I'm like you. I absolutely read my Bible every day.
Good.
And I believe in what you said, something that really struck her, and it caused me to call you. You said you believed in a remnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said that, didn't you? Right?
I did.
I agree, sir. I think God leaves a remnant to actually let us see how things actually were in this country. And if you'll go look at that remnant, sir, if you'll go examine Sally Hemings, if you'll go examine Rosewood, if you'll go examine some of those remnants of just little bits of piece of history, it'll let you know exactly how this country really was and what really happened in this country. I believe that. And the original question, I just never understand, how is it that you can think that this great bastion of freedom, and then we have such a history of limiting the freedom of others?
Well, we're not the only ones that it doesn't make it right. But Will, I really appreciate it.
Go together.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for your call, Will. We've got to run on. We've got several others in there, but you've done your homework, and I appreciate that for sure. So thank you for your call. All right, let's go to Leslie in Leeds, Alabama. Leslie, thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thank you. you. Enjoying your program. Just found y'all last week. Very good work.
Thank you.
First of all, Lincoln, if we're going to talk about slavery, Lincoln was not all on board with freeing the slaves. That came to the end when he wanted to get reelected.
Exactly.
But that's all a moot point at this point because, slavery's gone.
Yeah.
And everybody has an opportunity to succeed in this country. Any kind of slavery is wrong. It goes against the principles that God has set down for us. But it happened in our country. It's happening all over the world right as we speak. But in other countries, the slaves do not have the opportunity to speak out and be heard. The slavery we have in this country today, as I see it, is the chains are on the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because the government, if you hand out everything to people who are in distress, they start to believe, and it's reinforced, that I can't make it without somebody helping me, like the government.
Exactly.
Okay, so those chains, emotional chains, brain chains, are harder to overcome than foot chains. I'm also part Cherokee, and if we're going to talk about slavery and the injustice that is still being done to this very day.
Yes.
But we did not get the right to vote until 1963. We're not able to own land off the reservations. I could go on and on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The point is that God wasn't in the center of people's hearts, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution of the United States and the Federalist Papers are the most wonderful document a country would have because it does state those things, about freedoms and about the right to free speech and defending oneself. And, no other country is everybody running to. They're running away from the other countries. And I know for a fact in Somalia they are still practicing slavery.
Sure.
And the slaves were sold into slavery by their own people to the English to begin with. Yes, it's all wrong because God wasn't at the center of those people's hearts. But we have to move past that, not ask for reparations, but realize how far we've come and be grateful that we are in a nation that we can overcome. And I have overcome quite a bit, I might add.
Well, Leslie,
and I'm not going to go into that here, but I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I quit drinking the Kool-Aid.
Good for you. Well, I agree. I think that we have a whole lot more to be thankful for than to look back on and regret. And I need to learn that lesson myself a little better because I do have a tendency to sort of do a little retroactive stuff every now and then. But
you can go backwards and you can't fix backwards.
Sure. What Will was saying.
Not even God changes the past.
Yeah, and I understand what Will was saying. He was.
I do understand what he's saying.
He was very sincere, and he studied a lot, and I appreciate that. But I'm not gonna run this country down for something that happened 150 years ago. Now I understand it, and I will always, but I'm not gonna run this country down. And it's just we've got a lot of other problems in front of us right now that we're gonna have to deal with. But I shake my head every time I see coverage about this reparations thing in California and wherever else it's going on. It's
I'm also Catholic, so
there you go.
Really
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems, but we got to focus on who is truly in control. Treat one another with love and respect, and don't expect somebody to do something for you that you ain't willing to do for yourself.
Amen. Well, girl, thank you so much.
That's what it says. That's what it says in the Bible.
Amen.
Teach a man to fish, and he'll fish from now on. If he, give him a fish, and he'll keep. It's all biblical if you just follow those rules.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you, girl. Appreciate it.
Which the Egyptians weren't following for the Israelites.
Right. That's right.
400 years. Right.
Well,
400 years.
And then you talk about the Irish and all the. There's just countless examples out there that where we have failed, as a society, as human beings, as everybody else, continues to kind of stir the pot. We've got plenty to be anxious over and sorry for, but
well, if you know anything about Saul Alinsky and that group, that's what they do. They take one issue that's important to a disenfranchised group or somebody that's looking for disenfranchisement, and they rev that up. Not that they really care about the social situation. They're just using it as means to institute communism.
Yes.
And you can study that if you don't know anything about it.
Leslie, thanks for the call. Leslie from Leeds, Alabama. And we will take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls. We have Thomas from Athens waiting. And your phone calls as well. 833-687-4448. 833-68-RIGHT. I'm Jay Holland, sitting in for Phil Williams. You're listening to Right Side Radio. We're back on Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams, covering all of North Alabama, solid, conservative, and just plain right. We're going to go to Athens, Alabama, and Thomas. Athens, Alabama. Beautiful little town just west of Huntsville. Thomas, how are you, buddy?
I'm blessed, sir, and I appreciate your good service that you're doing today.
Thank
filling
you.
in for Colonel Phil.
Thank you.
Just wanted to do a little logic here. This country was formed uniquely. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as endowed by our Creator. No other country had ever done that. The Declaration of Independence, not a perfect document, but better than anything else. After that, the Confederation of States documents, founding documents, didn't work. Simply did not work. So the U.S. Constitution was developed. Again, another flawed document. However, the only way to have all 13 colonies in was to not mention slavery.
Yes.
That was maybe a mistake, but that is only way to get this all 13 colonies, including the 6 southern states, mostly run by Democrats, all run by Democrats.
I was just going to say, it was all the whole smash.
Yeah, to join and to defeat the British in the Revolutionary War, in the War of 1812. In the war between the states, 620,000 U.S. citizens and Confederate citizens died for freeing slaves, 620. That is equivalent, less than one-third of it, that's equivalent to over 2 million of our citizens dying today for the same purpose, okay? Plus, Abraham Lincoln, well, he was the first Republican president. The Republican Party wasn't even established until 1852, 10 years before Lincoln was elected. The Jim Crow laws, all in the South, all run by Democrats. Jim Crow laws were written by Democrats. You had senators like Robert Byrd, who was actually a Klan leader and served in the Senate as a Democrat for 40 years. If the Democrat Party has changed, I think the U.S. has changed too.
Well, I tell you, Thomas, truer words were never spoken. And, people need to realize that this thing didn't just happen. It was really a very complicated orchestration of what has resulted in the most freedom of any society ever. And that's us, the U.S.
If we can keep it.
If we can keep it. That's right. That's what Benjamin Franklin said. Thank you very much, buddy. All right. Jay Holland in for Phil Williams, the Colonel, and we'll take a quick break over the top of the hour. We'll be right back. This is Right Side Radio.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Rightside Radio. Thank you, Jeff Davis. Old friend of mine. Been making his living with his voice for a long time. Anyway, we're filling in for Phil. Phil Williams, the Colonel, out on assignment. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. And gosh, what great response we've had so far. It's been amazing. Our number is 833-687-4448, 833-68-RIGHT. Right Side Radio with Jay Holland here today, Friday. What's on your mind? I would like to, now, look, we can continue on with what we've been doing, and that's talking about the challenges we face in the United States of America, and they are significant. We could do that. I would like, if you would entertain me for a change, I would like for y'all to talk a little bit about this SEC realignment and the scheduling and all that. It's been kind of a buzz this week because the schedules were released and Kevin Skarbinski said, quote, Alabama and Auburn got screwed, unquote. And I'd like to know why. I have not indulged myself in reading as to what actually happened, who they're playing, why they're playing them. I do hope they kept some of the traditional rivalries. I'm sure Alabama and Auburn will continue to play. I'm sure Alabama and Georgia will continue to play. Auburn and Georgia will continue to play. I understand that Alabama and Georgia will play next year, not this year, but next year. And I've heard a few little hints and details, nothing major. So if y'all have a take on it, SEC football is only the biggest thing like ever in the fall. So, so it's a really big thing. And even though we're just getting into the summer real well, it's going to be here before we know it, folks. Face it. It's inevitable. And, I'm not setting any parameters or subjects or anything. If you want to talk about that, I'd love to hear your take on it because it's, it's really one of those things that everybody, whether they're football fans or not, ends up being involved in football because they're forced to. If the husband has the guys over for the game, the gals are just stuck. So they're going to be cooking or they're going to be watching the game too, just because there ain't nothing else on the TV except football. So that's just kind of the way it is. But sports, I've always liked. I played sports. I lettered in all four sports my senior year in high school. And that was football, baseball, basketball, and track. We didn't know what soccer was. In fact, in 1974, Pele came to the New York Cosmos, and we were like, who is Pele? What is soccer? And why is he worth $1 million? Because he got $1 million contract. Pele. He just passed away this past year, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He invented the bicycle kick and all this stuff. Pele was a heck of an athlete. But I didn't know anything about him. We had the closest thing we had to soccer was dodgeball. And soccer I just knew nothing about. Zero. Had never even heard of it. So that's how that was the sheltered life I lived in school.
Well, we got a couple text messages on it, and Brian from Huntsville said the SEC is merging the East and West and taking the top two for the championship. That's what they're saying. And then we got Tony from Piedmont. Let's see here. Oh, man, now they're all flooding in, so they're all going to the top. He says, instead of the SEC East and West, why not the SEC North and South? We have Frank from Madison, Alabama. I bet if Bama and Auburn feel slighted, they could petition to the Big 12 for admission.
Well, yeah, there's always going to be some jokester, prankster out there, too, and that's great, too, because sports is perfect for that. But it's really it's a big deal, and changing up eliminating essentially the SEC East and West is what we're talking about. We've got Oklahoma and we got Texas coming in, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But I'd really love to get somebody's take on it. It's 833-687-4448. That's also our text line. And if you want to watch the program, it's rightsideradio.org. That's rightsideradio.org. And click on the live stream link, and here we are. So me and Boomer and whatever's on your mind here at Rightside Radio. Phil Williams on assignment today, and the Colonel will be back Monday. And I did know that the post office, for all their troubles and the problems that they have, they're not only buying advertising and spending money like crazy, they're taking Monday off. And I thought that, oh, yeah, you guys, come on. So it's Juneteenth. So the post office will not be delivering or picking up mail to deliver or take delivery on Monday. You'll have to wait till Tuesday. So, hey, whatever you think, I'd love to hear from you on that even. But we've got a lot of interesting subjects going on, notwithstanding the future of America, with all of the various and sundry groups pushing for attention, actually not pushing. Some of them are even just outright, claiming it and saying pretty much the hell with you, So whatever's, it seems like whatever is whatever now, it just don't matter. So 833-687-4448 is the number to call. And Tony from Piedmont, far as I'm concerned, 4 written documents: 1 King James Bible, 2 Magna Carta, 3 Declaration of Independence, 4 the Constitution with the Bill of Rights. Not bad. That's right, Tony. And, they couldn't even agree on the Constitution. They had to put the Bill of Rights on there. That was a big deal. The Bill of Rights, the 10 original Bill of Rights, many in the Constitutional Convention did not want it, did not believe we needed it. And if not for the efforts of just a relatively vocal few that were persuasive, we probably would not have had the Bill of Rights. So it's very, very interesting and tenuous. And I really kind of want to go back to Will last hour. Will is a very studious guy. Will from Athens. He has read, he knows, and I think that he is very much a guy that has been diligent. But the history of this country cannot be condensed into just one single issue. And I'm not going to let slavery, no matter how bad it was, taint the good that this country has produced. And that's, up for debate. And I welcome Will anytime he wants to call. And I'm sure Phil will do the same. But I'm not going to let the opinion of one who has done some research, and it's obvious that Will has done his homework. But the overall good that has come out of this country, being the beacon that it has been for the world, in my opinion, far outshines the derogatory effects of what happened 150 years ago or whatever. It's just, you can't undo it. So why continue to wallow in all of this misery? Because the war between the states was a miserable time to live. I don't know if y'all have read really a whole lot about the conditions, but if, say, you were in Vicksburg, Mississippi in 1864 and you were reduced to eating rats and bugs, I'd say that'd be pretty bad. Nothing like we have today. Now, I don't doubt that there are pockets in big cities particularly, and there are places in this country where there are still some of those kinds of problems. But for an entire city the size of Vicksburg, Mississippi, reduced to eating rats and bugs just to survive is just not happening in this country. We do have some problems in small pockets and some issues going on, especially in big cities. Crime and all of this other stuff in Democrat-run cities particularly. But Will would not even listen to the fact that Democrats brought all this stuff on through Jim Crow. The Democrats wrote the Alabama Constitution of 1901. Now, I will say that throughout my tenure of being on radio talk show hosts, and I've been on many stations, but I have always been consistent in not wanting to rewrite the Alabama Constitution of 1901 because, and only one reason, and that's because of taxes. If you give liberal Democrats an inch, they're going to take a mile. And that's just the way it is. That's a proven fact. Democrats are going to do what Democrats do, and that's tax and spend. Joe Biden is a perfect example of it. He gets into the presidency, and within 8 months, he's got 3 bills passed for $1.7 trillion each. There was a headline that came up on Fox News just a moment ago that said the national debt has reached $32 trillion. This is what Democrats do. Now, I'm not saying the Republicans aren't partially responsible for some of this. They are. But by and large, the spending problem that everybody complains about in Washington, D.C. is Democrat-led. Just like the Democrats instituted Jim Crow, they're still playing havoc and making mischief on the rest of us. And the very guy, Will, from Athens, who was complaining about it, doesn't even acknowledge it, won't recognize it. He won't lay the blame where the blame properly lies, and that's with Democrats. Now, I'm not making this stuff up, and I wouldn't if I could, because the truth is always stranger than fiction, as the old saying goes. And the truth is, Democrats are the majority of the reason we have a $32 trillion debt. Now, Republicans like to pat themselves on the back for reducing some of that. Like Kevin McCarthy made the promise that he was going to kill those 87,000 IRS agents, which they didn't do. They reduced the amount that went to the IRS, but they didn't kill it. They didn't even come close to killing it. So, and the Republicans went along with the, with a lot of these bills that were passed. Obviously, they had to. So, I'm just really fed up with most all of it. Now, I'm a Republican, quote, and have been. I was a Republican in Etowah County when they could meet in a proverbial phone booth, as the old laugher went. I was one of the few that were vocal about being a Republican. Jim Martin was one. Charlie Bowman was one. Lynn Clayton was one. Don Wilson was one. There was just a handful of us. But I'm telling you, Republicans, by and large, have never really had the kind of power, especially until recently here in Alabama. So we'll talk more about it. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams, and you're listening to Rightside Radio. Rightside Radio, we're back. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. The Colonel is on assignment today, and I appreciate him asking me to fill in for him. So here we are. Love to get your take on any of a number of issues we've been talking about. 833-687-4448 here on Rightside Radio. We are all over North Alabama. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. So, what's your take? I still would love to talk a little SEC football. By the way, you can also text us, and I don't know, Boomer, we got any more new texts on the ticker line there?
Oh, the texts are kind of silent right now, surprisingly. But I did pull up these schedules you've been talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge sports fan, but honestly, kind of like you, I have when they first announced all of the new scheduling, I was all about it and listened to it all the time. But then I just kind of fell away from it this past whole springtime and everything when they were announcing it. But I got Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia's schedule pulled up. I just wanted to glance at it and see what everything was about.
Yeah. So what was Skarbinski talking about?
Well, since they're combining all the SEC and trying to do the top two teams play for the championship, you got Alabama's schedule right here, and they're playing. We got Auburn, Georgia, Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and then you got Vandy and South Carolina thrown in there as well, which is, I mean, that'll make it a way harder schedule.
That's
with all
a very
that.
tough schedule.
Yeah, and then Auburn has Florida, LSU, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, A&M, and Alabama. So you got all that.
That's no cakewalk
Arkansas.
either.
No, it's not. So I mean, they kind of definitely made those schedules way harder for them. And then you got Georgia over here, and this
Oh, yeah,
in 2024, this schedule right here, they got it for
UT Martin.
Well, they do have. They're starting off with Clemson.
Yeah.
I guess that but then you got the Gators. Still the Yellow Jackets, Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ole Miss, and the Longhorns. They got the Longhorns on their schedule. So yeah. So I mean, I guess it's a little bit harder for them too. So
I think Alabama's opening with Texas this year, isn't it?
they are
Yeah.
this year, I believe.
Yeah,
I know
this
they
year.
did last year.
Yeah.
So
Well, they went to Austin.
Right.
So I think that Texas is going to reciprocate. So they'll be at Bryant-Denny. So that should be interesting. And we have a bottom of the hour break coming up. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun. So we must be having a lot of it. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Phil Williams. You're listening to Right Side Radio. We'll take the break and we'll be right back. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland sitting in for Colonel Phil Williams. And we're covering all of North Alabama, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Would love to hear from you if you'd like to text us or call us. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Boomer and I were just talking about SEC scheduling, and I pulled up Georgia's schedule here.
For this year, right?
For this year.
Yeah, for this year.
Now, we all know that they have won the national championship twice. And in my opinion, this is how they've done it. I'm really not impressed, shall we say, especially with the first two games that Georgia is playing. And they're playing them at home, in between the hedges, and it's UT Martin is who they lead out with, September 2nd. Then they follow that up with the college football powerhouse at Ball State, September 9th. Then they welcome in the Gamecocks from South Carolina, which they've never been an SEC power, never. They've always been fairly good. And I'm not running down South Carolina, all you South Carolina fans. I'm just simply calling it like it is, like Yogi Berra. Remember Yogi? You got to call them like you sees them. South Carolina comes into Athens, and the first three games are in Athens. And then, the first four games are in Athens. They play UAB in Athens. Whoa. So the first four games, cupcakes. Then they're going to travel to Auburn. Now that's going to be a pretty good ball game. They'll be tested there. Then Georgia welcomes in Kentucky. That's tough. Then they travel to Nashville to play Vanderbilt. All right, Florida in the world's greatest martini party, or whatever they call that thing down there in Jacksonville. Georgia plays Florida. Not a big deal. Then, of course, Missouri, which almost beat them last year, comes to Athens on November 4th. Then Ole Miss. Now that's a new addition this year for Georgia. They've been avoiding the SEC West teams. So Mississippi will be November 8th, and it will be in Athens. Then the big game of the SEC East, and this will be the last year of the West and East divisions. But Tennessee will welcome in the Doggies from Georgia at Shields Watkins Field, Neyland Stadium, Knoxville, Tennessee, on the banks of the Tennessee River. That will be their only real big test again. And then, of course, they finish up the year with their so-called rival, Georgia Tech, which is another cupcake game for them. So I will say Kirby Smart has been very smart in his scheduling, which has allowed him to be competitive enough to capture two national championship games. I mean, that TCU game was just a laugher, just a total laugher. I knew that was going to be the case before they ever even played it. I didn't even watch it. It was terrible. Why in the world would you spend 3 hours watching something that you knew the outcome of? TCU, give me a break. They were all hyping that up like it was some big deal, you know? But it was just another tactic that Kirby Smart was able to maneuver and manipulate. But I started a Twitter storm after the national championship game. I said, very predictable. Didn't watch it. Georgia had such an easy schedule all year long, you know. But it's true. I'm not the biggest dog fan, even though I grew up in Dalton, Georgia. All my high school buddies, they look at me like I'm some Benedict Arnold. But, and in case for those of you that don't know who Benedict Arnold is, look him up. So it's definitely they think I'm conflicted or something. I don't know what their problem is, but my high school best friend from third grade, we swapped texts during college football season all the time. And, of course, he's the biggest, ugliest, hairiest dog fan there is. I mean, a hairy dog. And, he don't want to hear any real truth. And he don't want to know that Nick Saban has changed the face of college football. And following up with what, Coach Bryant had done before him and some of the other coaches, Gene Stallings and some of the really good coaches. Now, I'm not going to throw Bill Curry in there with that, what was that coach's name from Opp? I can't think of his name right now. He's kind of a forgettable guy anyway. What was his name? Golly, Dubose, Mike Dubose. Yeah. So, like many good programs, like the Israelites, they were forced to wander in the desert for 40 years, So Alabama had a series of, questionable coaches, before we finally found Saban in 2007. But anyway, it's just a really great time of the year. And while I've never been a really big sports talk guy, I've always been attracted to college football particularly, and high school football. I did high school football games for 30 years, I played high school football. I loved high school football. College football was always one of those, wow, big deal kind of things, And so I've always been interested in it. But, news talk has been my love throughout most of my career. And I was just telling Boomer the first talk show I ever did was in 1983, late January 28th, I believe it was, the day Coach Bryant passed away. I was a rock and roll DJ at WGAD, and I was getting ready to go on the air at 2:00. And while I was in the studio, and my engineer, Troy Pennington, was getting out of the studio, I was getting in the studio, and I heard the AP machine. That was back in the day when those mechanical AP machines just pounded out news all day long. I'll never forget that sound. It was so distinctive. And it was kind of loud, so we had to keep our studio door closed because, if you didn't, you'd hear the AP machine on the air. So anyway, I heard the AP machine hit 5 bells. Ding, 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 ding. And I thought, oh, my gosh, something's bad happening. Of course, we all knew Coach Bryant was in the hospital, Druid City Hospital in Tuscaloosa, in critical condition. So I walked out there and started reading. The thing had already typed the date line, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, close parentheses, hyphen, Coach Paul William, and it was typing out Bear when I saw it, and I knew that he had passed away. So I called my general manager, Ed Carroll. Many of you probably remember Ed, just a really great radio guy. Had a wonderful wife and two beautiful girls, Peggy and Patty. And we called his wife Alice in Wonderland. Alice was just so sweet. She was in the Navy. She was a Navy wave. And Ed was a bosun's mate on the USS Boyd in World War II. If you don't know who the USS Boyd is, it was a Fletcher-class destroyer that drew fire in the South Pacific fighting the Japanese. And Ed, he was always a hero of mine anyway. But he hired me at WGAD and started mentoring me through the radio business. And he's one of the reasons why I stayed with it. I had started in high school in 1973 at WTTI in Dalton, Georgia, but had come to Jacksonville State, and we signed on WLJS, the campus radio station there. And I had really gotten involved in radio, and in October of 1977, I was hired at the old WQEN, Q104, and I did nights, 7 to midnight. And, me and David Driscoll, my old buddy in Huntsville, and David, if you're listening, I hope you are. He's an old radio dog, too. He was at WAAY and some legendary stations in Huntsville. And David Driscoll and Leo Davis, me and David and Leo were all hired at the same time at Q104. So we really were trendsetters back then. Q104 was the first real 100,000 watt FM that ever played contemporary music on an FM station. Prior to that, FMs were like, we called them, quote, elevator music, unquote. So anyway, we had a 100,000 watt FM. You could hear from Auburn to Chattanooga and, as far west as Tuscaloosa and as far east as Rome, Georgia. I'm just booming there, And it was massive. I was on the air there one night, and I asked for the 23rd caller for an album. And this is no joke. This is the truth. This was a Friday night, and I asked for the 23rd caller for a Boston album or whatever. And we shut the phone system down from Birmingham to Rome and to Atlanta. The whole South Central Bell system collapsed because so many people were trying to call in to get that album. Phones went dead. Everybody, that Monday morning, South Central Bell was at our studio, at our station, wondering what the heck we did. And so from that, prior to that, we only had 543, 546 was our exchanges for Gadsden. Then after that, they created 545 exchange for Gadsden. They put us on 545. We were the only station or business or residence in the entire area on 545. So we wouldn't collapse the phone system again. So boomers looking at me like, you got to be kidding me. But no, that's the truth. That actually happened. And we collapsed the phone system on a Friday night from Gadsden, Alabama, just by asking for the 23rd caller for an album. So radio was huge, Huge, big, really big in the late 70s. And I stayed at Q104 till 1980 and then went to WGAD. But the first talk show I did, I was terrified because I called my manager and said, Ed, Coach Bryant's died. And he said, oh, mercy me, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I think we ought to take calls. We can play records anytime, And he said, oh, yeah, okay, do that. And he said, while you're at it, he said, just mark off all the commercials. We'll make them up tomorrow, he said. And I immediately got nervous, very scared. I mean, I was going to have to be on the air from 5 minutes after NBC News, 5 minutes after the hour to the top of the next hour. That's 55 minutes of dead air I got to fill. And I was literally scared. So NBC News goes off. I open the mic. I do the weather just like I normally would. And then I read the little small paragraph that the AP machine had typed out. Coach Paul William Bear Bryant has died at the age of 69, Tuscaloosa, Durand City Hospital, blah, blah, blah. By the time I got that little short paragraph out, completely read, all 6 lines in the control room were blinking. So that day I had on Steve Clay, Wayne Owen, John Kroll, all of the guys that lived around the Gadsden area that played for Coach Bryant. I had one of the best guests I had that day was Jimmy Smothers. Jimmy was very good friends with Coach Bryant. In fact, he would end up after the games at Coach Bryant's lake home on Lake Tuscaloosa every Saturday night. And they would party late, early, whatever, 2 a.m. Jimmy confided in me. He said, I was good friends with Coach Bryant, but I got more of my information for my sports stories from Mary Harmon than I did Coach Bryant. So Jimmy was great. Anyway, we'll take the break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Rightside Radio. Rightside Radio. I'm Jay Holland, filling in for Phil Williams. Covering all of North Alabama, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Okay, kind of wrapping up here. We've got less than 3 minutes, so I'm just going to kind of hang on to it here and sort of sum up everything. It's been great. Pretty much went as I expected it would. You know, when you throw things open for folks, they respond. And I want to thank everybody who called in. You know, Will was probably one of the most provocative ones that called. And while I appreciate his perspective and especially his knowledge, I just don't think he's right as far as wanting me to feel some sort of guilt for something I had nothing to do with. And unfortunately, that's kind of a characteristic in this day and time. If you look at what's happening in California and, you know, places where they're demanding in your face, you do this or else what? That kind of attitude is just not productive. It's divisive. It hurts more than it helps. Especially when we're $32 trillion in debt in this country. I mean, that's a headline just today. We hit $32 trillion. So we're going the wrong way fast, more than fast. We're going the wrong way at light speed, at warp speed. And it's just not getting any better right now. But I don't look for that trend to continue. I think that we have what it takes to rid ourselves of these problems. Now, obviously, they have manifested themselves in some very destructive ways. The Summer of Love in 2020 as a good example. It's really disheartening that it has to come to that. But you have all of these groups now. Everybody's in a group. You know, you have all of these traditional groups. Then you have some of the newest groups. And they're all wanting something from somebody just because. There's no particular reason. There's no real rhyme. There's no real logic. Just give it to me and shut the heck up. So it's really a sad day from that point of view. But the hope is in you. You're where the real power lies, not with these groups that are so whiny and needy. You're the hope. You're the reason we're here, and you're the reason we're going to stay here. So keep it up. Keep up the education, keep up the resistance, keep up everything that you're doing because it's working. Love you guys. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of your day. I'm Jay Holland. Take care. This is Rightside Radio.